Good morning, great to see you. I'm Nicky Campbell. Welcome to The Big Questions. Today we're live from Netherhall School in Cambridge. Welcome everybody to The Big Questions this morning. Now, the cover-up of decades of abuse of children by priests, teachers and bishops in the Catholic Church across the world has been one of the biggest scandals of the 21st century. Last September, when Pope Francis met American victims of child abuse, he told them God weeps for their suffering. And he told American bishops that he was overwhelmed with shame that men entrusted with the tender care of children violated these little ones and caused grievous harm. So the Pope set up a special commission to tackle the issue, and he personally appointed Pete Saunders, abuse victim and founder of the British National Association of People Abused in Childhood, to be on it. But now, following Peter's criticism of some of the Commission's decisions and deliberations, the Vatican has announced Peter is taking a leave of absence. It was news to Peter. Is the Catholic Church serious about confronting child abuse? And Peter, you got a mention in the speech after the BAFTA was awarded to spotlight the film because of your fantastic work in this field, which is, you know, as a survivor yourself, which has been an inspiration to so many people. But you say that the speed at which the Catholic Church is proceeding on this and what they're doing is an outrage.
Nicky, I'm a massive, massive fan of Jesus. And when Jesus went into the temple 2,000 years ago and found it being defiled by various people, gamblers, traders, probably with the collusion of the elders of the temple, he didn't form a committee or a commission. He picked up the tables, he threw the people out of the temple. And what people do to children, what many priests are doing to children, is far worse than that. Now, the issue...
Why is this happening, though? Why do you believe they're not doing enough?
Well, let me say what I think as an example. And I hear every single day, Nicky, as both the NAPAC founder, but also as a current member of the Pope's Commission, I hear from Catholic voices telling me to keep going, to keep the fight up, because children are still in danger today as we speak. This is not in any sense a historical problem. It's a live problem as we speak. And I think what epitomizes the challenges of the institutional church, not the people of the church, of whom I'm just one of millions, is the institutional church is headed up by people who I would say at the very least are unhelpful on this issue. And let me give you an example of one employee of the church, a very senior man of the church, who compared the church to a corporation. In fact, he compared it to a transport trucking company. And this was George Pell, who's a cardinal, who sits with the Pope's inner circle. He likened the church to a transport company where one of the drivers, and he said this is on record, he said one of the drivers, if that person stops and rapes a child or a woman, do you blame the company for the actions of that man? Right, there are 2 points there. Yes, you probably do blame the company because they have a duty of care to look after anybody that comes into contact with their employees. That's critical, but far, far more importantly, and this is where the church stands guilty as charged in my opinion, you do not put that driver onto another route, which is exactly what the church does with its abusing priests.
Sarah. Nobody disagrees with that, but the church has not learned its lesson, and Peter has been marginalised because he is speaking truth unto power, isn't he?
Well, that would be the impression. Of course, we agree with everything that Peter's doing. So what is the church doing? Well, the first point, you're right. They're totally responsible for the people that represent the church. So what's the church doing? The first thing, it's doing absolutely rigorous screening of priests who are people who are trying to get into the seminaries. It's much more difficult to get in, and it's much easier to get thrown out. There is St. Luke's Centre, which is becoming, alas, specialised in the mentality of abuse. You can Google all about it. People as aspiring to the seminary have to do hugely exhaustive questionnaires.
Do you think it's gone too far in some ways?
A lot of Catholics do. I asked my friend, do your children feel safe in church? Are you feeling safe with your children? She said, my son's going to first confession. There has to be a glass door between the priest and everybody else. There has to be a woman sitting outside the confessional. She said, this is over the top. I said, it might feel over the top, but frankly, considering what's happened, nothing could be over the top.
But a lot of your friends, a lot of fellow Catholics think it is over the top.
A bit over the top. But you know, I went into my church porch and I said, how easy is it to find the safeguarding officer? We need to do more of this. Fortunately, in my parish church, the first poster you see, safeguarding. Here's Jennifer's number, and if you can't get in touch with Jennifer and you have a concern about a child, it says at the bottom, ring the police.
Proper screening.
999, ring the police.
Are absolutely confident there is now proper screening. Lucy, I saw you reacting. You're a survivor.
We can't be complacent, obviously.
I'm interested as to how you're saying that we have these safeguarding officers. They're not independent. They're not independently trained. The church is doing it all in-house, and this is the problem. They are not holding themselves to accounts. They are doing everything themselves, where they have proven consistently they are not able or do not have the knowledge or the expertise to offer robust enough safeguarding training that is going to protect our children. And I get very confused when people are saying that actually we're doing everything we possibly can. You're not. I'm not seeing the Catholic Church go to the government and say, we are accountable for abuse within our own institution. It's awful. We're very sorry. We want to work with other institutions and the government to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Lucy, do you still think it's all about protecting the institution rather than the children?
They are protecting their reputation and they are protecting their own priests. We're not having all the information handed over to the police in all cases. We are not having priests cooperate in all the files fully accountable to the public and to the police. We are not having lifelong support for the victim, disregard of whether they hold a faith in the Catholic Church or not. We are not recognising that due to 2012, the Adverse Childhood Experience Report...
Is it still being hushed up?
It's definitely still being hushed up. It's being hidden.
Sarah,
it just seems to me...
You believe this, you believe the current... I'll be back with you just 1 second, if you may. I do apologise, but you believe the current... And Peter, I'll be with you too, and Christina. You believe the current Pope is a lot better than Mr. Ratzinger was, the former Pope, yeah?
I do believe, actually, that Pope Francis is on a zero-tolerance mission. And
see, the problem with Joseph Ratzinger before him, there's a lot of questions to be asked about.
He did actually speed up the processes of the laicization of priests. But the truth is, Lucy, if anybody is unhappy, we've not done enough. That's true.
Is Joseph Ratzinger's record on this unquestionable?
I think he did a lot more than people think. He actually speeded up the processes. But the truth is, Lucy, if people are unhappy, not enough has been done. But the grassroots person in the Catholic Church is under the impression that a huge amount is done. If you go to our parish secretary, if she hires a room to somebody from outside the church, she has to get a DBS check if they're just teaching football for little ones.
It's not about being unhappy. Crimes are still being committed. Children are still being abused and raped, and that's not being stopped. If anyone's unhappy about that, they need to be absolutely appalled and disgusted about that. All survivor organisations have walked out of talks with the Catholic Church in the UK today. They are not doing their job.
Nikki,
Christina,
can I speak as a commissioner?
Second, let me put it to the other side in just a second, or somebody who has a considered opinion, not necessarily of the other side, but somebody who understands everything you're saying, I'm sure. Christina O'Doney, there are a lot of questions that have been asked on Joseph Ratzinger, especially when he was on the doctrine, the congregation of the doctrine of the faith, you know, that particular body. His own brother, Georg Ratzinger, was head of the Regensburg choir at the time when a lot of children were abused. He, of course, knew nothing about it and is completely innocent of that. But the whole thing does smack of, here we go again, and inadequate responses mean that there's so much suspicion cast upon the church. And you can understand all that, I know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would, if my child were touched by a grown-up, especially one in such a trusted role as a priest, I cannot be responsible for what I would do. However, I think that there is a huge presumption of innocence that we have to take into account. And so I can, although in no way would I condone what has happened, I can understand that when you were talking about process, what we have to do is make sure that those who stand accused, whether they're celibate or priests or whoever they are absolutely, without a question, guilty as charged. So I can understand process, I can understand a slow process, but what we can't accept from our church is the cover-up. We can't accept complicit bishops.
Is there still a cover-up?
Well, the word on the street, and I understand that in your parish everybody's bending over backwards to be helpful, but the word on the street is bishops still turn a deaf ear, a blind eye, and are prepared to move guilty parish priests.
This is what
and
needs
that has to stop.
Can I give
Why hasn't it changed? You say, Peter, Sarah said this is what needs to change. Why hasn't it changed? This is an absolute outrage.
A normal Catholic on the street, all of us, we are absolutely bewildered at this institutional resistance. And although we have these structures in place, all very well, and although priests are willing to take the rap when they are innocent for ages, it's better that priests take the rap who are innocent than that children get harmed. But it does seem there needs to be a culture shift, especially in other countries. Parents won't come forward. They want to protect the church. And I tell them, don't protect the church, you've got to protect your children. Ordinary Catholics are absolutely appalled and disgusted.
Speaking as the Pope's commissioner, I have to say with great sadness, Nikki, that I do not believe that we have zero tolerance, which is what the Pope said must happen. And I can give you a number of examples very briefly. Whilst I was in Rome just a few weeks ago, it was reported to the Commission, and although we are not supposed to deal with individual cases, when you hear what I'm going to say, you will see the reason for my anger, is one of our Commission members was told by two visiting Catholic priests, two good priests, who had gone to their bishop because they had discovered that one of their colleagues in their parish was abusing the children, was a child rapist, let's name it for what it is. They went to their bishop. This isn't years ago, this is weeks ago. They went to their bishop and told them that what this man was doing. Their bishop said they must do nothing and remain silent. They then went to the police in the local area to report. This is in Italy. They went to the police, and the police said, their first question was, have you spoken to your bishop? Now, those children are still being raped and abused by this man because nothing is being done. Now, I said to...
Do you think that's happening in a lot of places?
All over the world,
priests still?
All over the world. And please, let me finish. I said to the Commission member, my colleague, who happens to be a priest, a Jesuit priest, I said, what have you done with that information? And his words were CDF, which is Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, where we know a file will join a file of thousands to be examined by clerics who will inevitably do probably nothing while those children are still being abused. Now, that cannot carry on. And when I asked to come back to zero, and I'll finish with this, to come back to the zero tolerance and what has been happening, the Pope made an incredibly inept remark a few days ago, where asked about abusing clergy and bishops who stand up for them or protect them or move them about, and that's what we're up against, the Pope said they should resign. Now, that is appalling, because if you or I, Nikki, were accused and found guilty or credibly accused of moving child rapists from one place to another, I don't think it would be a matter of resignation. It would be a matter of dismissal and handed over to the police.
As a matter of fact, what he says the best thing they could do... As a matter of fact, what Pope Francis said was, as a matter of fact, what they could do is the best thing they could do is resign. He didn't say that's the only thing that would happen, but it's what's important to note here. We've had a very, I think, imbalanced discussion here about what the Church has not been doing. There's a book coming out called The Whole Truth by a guy called Joe Kless. He's an agnostic, Chicago-based district attorney, and he's made millions out of suing the Church for these kind of abuse claims. And he actually says in this book the most important thing is that we protect children, that we prevent abuse from happening, that we act swiftly when abuse does happen. He says the institution that's done more as a reforming model in those areas has been the Catholic Church. And
Let me ask you this.
Joe Kless,
Let me ask
when
you
we
this.
look at what the Church has actually done,
let me ask you this. This is important. Let me
place,
ask you this question. If there had not been lawyers like that, if there had not been brave survivors talking, if there had not been investigations, if there had not been any of this and people releasing this information and going to the press and saying, my goodness me, this is happening, this is awful, something needs to be done, do you think of its own volition the Catholic Church would have moved to clean this up?
Not as swiftly, certainly not. And I, as a Catholic, am really glad that it has happened. I'm really glad that the journalists, like in the film Spotlight, portrayed in the film Spotlight, I'm glad that lawyers, I'm glad that all the people who have tried to uncover this has done that. Well, I think because there were bishops and there were priests who wanted to cover up, partly because they wanted to protect the image of the Church, partly because they wanted to save their own necks. That was disgusting, and anyone who has done that deserves to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. No one, I think, on this panel denies that. No Catholic would deny that. The point, however, is to say justice to the victims of abuse, to the survivors, I should say, of abuse, does not justify injustice to the truth of what not only the Church has done, but also saying things about the Church in general. The Church is a hugely decentralized organization. What's true in England and America is not necessarily true in Japan and Argentina. You have to look at the Church as a reality, as a over 1 billion people, and say, actually, what has this Church done over here? What has this Church done over here? What is the Vatican doing to try to make sure that the best case practices are there across the board? And the Church has done a huge amount to make sure that's happened, and is leading the way in doing that.
Peter, we're in no way are we questioning the beauty, the holiness of the Church globally. But we are saying that when it comes to this most heinous crime, this most disgusting crime, the Church has been complicit up to...
What do you mean the Church? There have been bishops who have, there have been priests who have. You can't say the Church as a whole. That's ridiculous thing to say.
The Church hierarchy.
Yes,
okay.
Not all members of the Church hierarchy have done that. That is a ridiculous thing to say. It is elements of the hierarchy and elements of the priesthood that have done that.
The question is, and I'm sure this is what Peter and Lucy and others are saying, and you're saying is absolutely not the case, is whether there is an institutional mindset which has been
it's
which is set in here.
That do need to change.
Mindsets need to change. You had your arm up early on to say something. Any other comments quickly? Then I want to raise another issue which was actually raised on this programme about 3 weeks ago, that of the confessional, which really did get a lot of debate going on social media after it was on the programme. What would you like to say? Good morning.
We've spoken a lot about safeguarding and preventative measures with the glass walls and everything, but if the Vatican is that serious and the Catholic Church are that serious about preventing child abuse, why in recent training guidelines that have been issued to all bishops say that it is not necessarily the bishop's obligation to report that to the authorities? And that is the responsibility of the parents.
Okay.
And then we have parents...
Sarah, that was a misreporting, was it?
Yeah, that was a misreporting, and the Pope stated straight afterwards the actual fact that they are obliged.
So you're saying it's mandatory for all bishops to report?
That was an internal
Lucy, was that a
conference.
misreporting?
Are you saying it's mandatory for all bishops to report known abuse?
That is exactly what the Pope is asking them to do.
That's what he's asking for, so that's what's not in place right now. And the Church seems to think that it's above the law somehow, because if we were talking about the abuse in, say, the entertainment industry, everybody's up in arms about it, saying everyone must go to the police. But for the Church, priests and bishops don't need to go.
I don't think that's quite
fair.
Sarah,
allow me in the time we have to lead on to...
I don't think the BBC came rushing forward to admit its problems ahead of time.
The Catholic Church aren't rushing forward, are they? That's why we're having...
How many, we're talking about thousands. We're not talking about Jimmy Savile and Stuart Hall. We're talking about thousands of priests across the world and thousands of children that have been abused with respect. The confessional. Allow me to raise the seal of the confessional.
Yes, yes.
Well, Peter, I'll put this to you. In what? This is what people who are non-Catholics just do not understand. In what moral universe is it in any way right, for example, whether to be a priest confessing to another priest, and he says, look, I have been abusing children, I have been raping children, and I'm out of control, I don't know what to do about this. For that priest who has taken the confession not to go to the police straight away, what moral planet are you on?
Well, the reason for that, I totally understand. Listen, I really do understand. If I were a non-Catholic, I would find that really difficult to understand.
It's not funny, is it?
It's not funny. The reason I laugh is saying just because the only way you can understand is if you understand the seriousness that we take of the confessional itself. And that's very difficult if you're not a Catholic, and I realise that. The point is that the seal of the confessional is that no matter what you confess to a priest, he can never, ever tell anyone else. Never. And that actually is a hugely important part of our religion. Hugely important. Now, what he would say, however, to someone who is engaging in abuse is repent. And if you're repenting, that means guess what?
Well,
you don't down to the police.
Repent.
To repent does not just mean, oh, I'm sorry, now I'll do it again. To repent means turning away completely from what you've done.
To get God's forgiveness.
And also go and do justice.
Well, you need the forgiveness of the people, the children that you've raped, surely, Lucy. Oh, Arif.
It is an important part of your belief, and it's a disgusting part of your religion, because that is why. You know, you can bleat all you like about the beauty and the glory of the church and all of that, but the fact is that we have, as these brave people have said, we have rapists walking around in cassocks, and it's going to take many years for that to stop happening. The other thing I would say, now I've got the chance, Nicky, if I could, is that in some ways it doesn't surprise me, and I'm surprised that you're surprised about this. The Catholic Church has a great deal of form on being very slow at dealing with things, not in the interests of justice, I might add, but in the interests of ignorance and superstition. It took 350 years for them to admit that Galileo was right. The rest of the... Not obviously, you might say, because they wanted to be absolutely sure, but the rest of the world was sure long before that.
Well, actually,
they've been obstructing their complicity in the massacres in Rwanda. I don't know how long we'll have to wait before they admit what they've done to that. So actually, I'm surprised that you're surprised about that.
Sarah?
Can I just clarify this point about confession as well, which is extremely important? You know, part of confession is restitution. You can't actually... A confession box is not to go in, dump your crimes and walk away. You are not absolved if you are not sorry, and if you don't make restitution. People misunderstand confession themselves. You know, if you don't
so you have to be sorry?
No, not sorry. You have to make restitution. So if you walk out of the confessional and you don't make restitution, your absolution is absolutely null and valid.
Surely restitution means going to the police.
Absolutely. A priest could say in confession, this is what you need to do to express your restitution. This is what you need to do, otherwise forget your absolution. That is what they can say. So this is that people need to understand why they're going to confession.
Lucy.
I mean,
you're saying that your beliefs put you above the law, because if you're saying that it's about...
No, I think you've misunderstood what I said, Lucy. I'm sorry. You do have to make restitution, or you are not forgiven, because you were sorry.
I'm not interested in forgiven, or who's forgiven or not. What I'm interested in is whether child rapists are allowed to carry on walking around in the church, and whether they are told they must go to the police. It's a very simple question. No, that is exactly what is happening right now. That is exactly what is happening right now. And you're shaking your head and you're talking in the past tense. And this is happening today.
Peter,
we know this.
Last word. The worst possible thing is if innocent people... It's not the worst possible thing, of course.
If you have evidence that it is happening in any particular case, you should go to the police. Anyone should go to the police. Anyone should tell the church as well. So
you're saying priests don't need to do that. Anyone, including a priest,
we're not saying that. Absolutely not saying that.
So why is it
Are
not
you worried
mandatory?
about innocent people being dragged into this because of some sort of a climate of accusation?
I'm actually not worried about innocent priests because I spoke to a priest who had been maliciously accused, and I had a chat. He'd been 18 months out of being able to minister to people. He was really sad, he was depressed, he was innocent, and I said, look, this is what Jesus goes through. It's much better that you get some pain for 2 years than that children get abused. And he's, yes, I'm here to be like Jesus. The vast majority of priests behave like that.
Absolutely.
But God bless you for doing the
laughing?
work you're doing, otherwise people would be complacent.
Arif,
I'm absolutely happy that you're doing the work you're doing. Please, God,
why
carry on.
did you find that unconscionable? Very quickly.
No, I was laughing because I'm sort of tiring of this sort of stream of superstition and nonsense that's used to paper over genuine suffering. And I think we could...
Last word.
I think we would benefit from a period of silence on your parts would be extremely welcome while we listen to these brave people who have all my respect and sympathy.
I think a period of silence
have a great deal
from
more
your
to
part
say.
would also be quite welcome.
I don't think you're really acknowledging the good... You know, my friend Tom,
We have to
who wrote
move
the
it.
film Spotlight.
We have to move on.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you all so much. Thank you for your heartfelt comments and your explanations for non-Catholic ears. It's very much appreciated, Peter and Christina and Sarah, and thank you, as ever, for your bravery as well, Lucy and Peter.